3 states. But today, there are signs of progress in Washington. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid has set a vote for Monday on legislation that would protect the LGBT community from workplace discrimination. And to talk about it, joining us now is Representative Mark Pocan, Democrat of Wisconsin, and Chris Geidner, legal editor at BuzzFeed.com. Chris, I want to start with you because the bill in the Senate is called the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, or ENDA, and it bars companies with more than 15 employees from discriminating against workers on the basis of their sexuality or sexual orientation. And Joe Manchin of West Virginia was the last holdout among the Democrats. He's now on board. 2 Republicans, Collins of Maine and Kirk of Illinois, are also on board. And then there's hope that 3 other Republicans, Hatch, Murkowski, and Portman, may also support this bill. And if they do, that would give Harry Reid a filibuster-proof majority to move this thing forward on Monday. So, Chris, do you think that will happen?
Yeah, I don't think that Senator Reid would have called the vote unless he knew that he had the 60 votes in this instance. This is legislation that he's been holding for a while. It passed out of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee earlier this summer, and he said that he would bring it to the floor when he thought that they had the votes. So I mean, you've got the 60 there, and there are a couple of other Republicans that advocates have been pushing.
Congressman Pocan, you're an original co-sponsor of the House version of ENDA, but the odds of it passing in the House aren't very strong. Here's Texas Congressman Louis Gohmert on why he opposes ENDA. Take a listen.
It also means that Christian schools would be forced to hire openly homosexual individuals, and it's kind of tough to teach biblical principles in Romans 1 in a school if you are of the persuasion of being homosexual.
Now, Congressman, the religious exemption clause for ENDA is fairly broad, so would it really force people to hire openly gay teachers, as we just heard?
The law has been crafted, very carefully to make sure that, one, we're protecting people who are gay or lesbian, bisexual, transgendered, but also we're making sure we respect the First Amendment rights of religious institutions. I think it's crafted in a way to pass the Senate, and our job then is to try to get it to pass the House as well. But it's far past time, and I think some of the rhetoric that you're going to hear from members will probably not be based on the law, but it'll be based on rhetoric, and that's just all they're going to have.
Chris, as you write today in BuzzFeed, ENDA has not even had a vote in the Senate since 1996. So how significant do you think that is?
Well, I think that obviously we've seen a sea change of the country's view of how these issues are to be looked at, and the fact that this legislation, one of the biggest problems that this legislation has is that most Americans think it's already law. And so when you're starting from that point, it gets more and more difficult to really get the momentum to get the bill to be pushed, and the advocates of ENDA are hoping that this Senate vote can do that.
Congressman, even though the Supreme Court struck down DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act, on June 26th, there are still members of the National Guard who are being discriminated against. In fact, there are 9 states which refuse to comply with the Supreme Court ruling against DOMA, and the Secretary of Defense put those states on notice last night. Take a listen.
Everyone who serves our country in uniform, everyone in this country, should receive all the benefits they deserve and they've earned, and in accordance with the law. Everyone's rights must be protected.
Congressman, Secretary Hagel also says he's ready to take further action to bring those 9 red states into compliance. What do you think of that?
Well, it's the directive from their military leader. They should follow it and make sure that we don't discriminate in the National Guard. So I'm hopeful, in fact very hopeful, that that'll happen. I think it's important to note, Jonathan, that when Chris mentioned, part of the problem we've had so far on ENDA, really 2/3 of the people in the country support ENDA. Over 50% of Republicans, against 56%, support ENDA. It's just, I think some of the problem has been people don't think right now that you can discriminate against gays and lesbians, but you can in 29 states and even even more for transgendered people. So this is really important to do, whether we take care of it within the National Guard through a federal directive or the law that really needs to happen. This is important, and I think our real barrier has been that most people just assume it's in place because they've supported it, and it makes common sense to not discriminate.
Chris, real fast, the state of Texas has said that it will not spousal ID cards to same-sex couples. What can Chuck Hagel do to make Texas and the other 8 states change their ways?
I mean, one of the issues that was raised when Chris Johnson from the Washington Blade asked about this was the fact that the federal government does fund a lot of the state National Guard programs, and so there is that funding string that they're going to be able to point to, and there is the fact that the National Guard is can be run by the federal government in certain aspects, and Hagel made clear that they are going to push for the states that have thus far refused to issue ID cards to do so.
All right, and with that, Congressman Mark Pocan and Chris Geidner, thanks very much.